Joining me now is the Superintendent of Detroit Public Schools Community District, Dr. Nikolai Vitti. Dr. Vedi, it's good to see you.
Always good to see you and be with you too.
This is coming on the end of a very long school year, and I don't think we can say enough what it has been like for teachers and for kids, for parents and administrators, just again, still trying to navigate in and out, learning loss, getting back into the routine of school, because when it's been interrupted for so long, it is hard for kids to get back.
Yeah, on the positive side, it is, I think we're one step closer to getting to this new normal.
Right.
We've been in person throughout the year with the exception of a couple days in November and then obviously January when we had that surge. So the positive is we've had more in-person learning this year. The negative is there's still residue, if you will, vestiges of the height of the pandemic with chronic absenteeism and just breaking the routine of regular school. And this year has, I think, been even harder on teachers. On the one hand, it's great to have the kids back in school, but when they came back, they were farther behind. The normal routines of school had been disrupted, just relationships, trust.
Yeah, I mean, you think about social. You think about a first grader who learns how to sit on a carpet and to be in the proximity of other students, and all of a sudden you've got third graders who maybe missed a year of that social interaction, and you think about the then transitioning from middle school to high school. All of those things that it's a catch-up.
Yeah, well, you talked about early grade, which is exactly right, or even high school. Our 10th graders, for example, had never been in high school before. So they went from, 3/4 of 8th grade, and then we weren't in person last year, so they arrived to high school as 10th grade. So, if we go back and think about how important that 9th grade year is with just understanding where your classrooms are, who's your guidance counselor, building a relationship with your teachers.
Yeah.
That was all
eliminated. Who are the kids
eliminated.
you hang out with in the hallway before
Correct.
third hour?
Yep.
And so it feels like that has jumped up high on the list of things that you've just had to manage and that educators have had to think about in these last 2 years. So now if we back up and take a look at some of the things that you'd like to accomplish, you finally have an infusion of money. Is it $1.2 billion? What are we looking at?
For the first time, as superintendent, my work has always been in large urban school districts. I felt equitably funded. I felt that we had the resources to do.
That's a huge statement.
What we've always wanted to do. Things like after-school programming, summer school, mental health support at all schools, lower class sizes, more one-on-one tutoring or intervention in literacy, a nurse in every school. So these are things that everyone would tell you from an educational research point of view we should be doing to address the whole child and to help our kids catch up when they fall behind, but haven't had the funding to do it. And an infusion of one-time money for facility upgrades in our school district as well.
Which is going to make a huge difference. You're looking at about, $700 million, and I'm putting new AC systems in many of the schools.
Right. Yeah. Right now, only 35% of our schools have air conditioning. In 5 years, with the $700 million investment, or part of it, 95% of our schools will have air. So, our faculty, our staff, and our students have sort of normalized not having normal facilities. I remember being in one school, an older building, with a group of veteran teachers, and I was talking about the changes that we were going to implement. And they walked away, grabbed me, and said, "Dr. V, you know what? You're right. We've normalized not having air. We've normalized, moving kids from one classroom to the other because the roof, is caving in, or the heavy water leakage. So it's exciting to have the dollars to do what we've always wanted to do. The challenge will be continuity and reoccurring investment. So outside of the facilities, when we look at after-school programs, summer school, or smaller class sizes, all of that will go away at the end of next year.
Right,
because
but you want to make sure.
Money.
Yeah, you want to make
Right.
sure that continues to go. And when you decide, and those big meetings, and sitting there and saying, okay, this is how we're going to allocate that funding. Right. What was that decision-making process like?
Well, it's always linked to our strategic plan, and I think the board and I have done a good job of saying this is what our focus will be, and these are our gaps: learning loss, chronic absenteeism, and use the dollars in a way that we've always wanted to use them based on our plan, but linked to the challenges of COVID. Moving forward, after the dollars are spent at the end of next year, what we're going to look at is what had the greatest impact on students, and what things do we need to prioritize and maybe take off that we historically have been funding to prioritize other things like mental health. And that's the one that we've been talking a lot about due to the pandemic, but even before the pandemic, we know that our kids are dealing with a lot, and they can't focus on learning if we're not addressing those issues.
So what does that support look like? Is that more counselors in school? Is that a school psychologist in every elementary school that we see? But when you say that, what does that look like?
So when we first started the reform now almost 4 years ago, we did put a counselor in every school. We did increase social workers. With the COVID relief funding money, what we've done is increase contractors. So entities that had always been working in the district, but really here or there in pockets, now have been scaled. So we have about 5 organizations like Black Family Development that they go out and hire the social workers or psychologists, and then we partner with them to serve our kids at the school site so that we can cut through a lot of the red tape around transportation after school, because the kids are there in school and they can give direct assistance and support one-on-one in a small group in the mental health needs that they have.
I remember talking to you the first time that you were up here at the Mackinac Policy Conference, and you were talking about equitable funding and getting people to understand what the challenges the district was facing and what your thoughts were in moving forward. Now you say you have a bit of a piece in terms of money-wise. What is the story that you are telling business leaders and and foundation heads about DPSCD right now?
Well, unfortunately, the narrative sounds the same. We're still not equitably funding schools.
There's always work to be done.
But with that said, these last 2 years, outside of the challenges of COVID, so COVID testing, PPE, deep cleaning, that's where some of the dollars went to. But a lot of the dollars went to the things that we talked about earlier. And what I've said to our team, what I've said to our principals is at the end of next year, we do have to see results. We have to see an improvement in daily attendance and chronic absenteeism and growth in literacy and math, because I think that's going to be important to tell our story about what we can actually do with equitable funding. So at the end of next year, I think we're going to have some clear data points to show that with equitable funding, we can do a much better job of raising student achievement at DPSCD, and I would argue throughout Michigan in pockets where additional funding is needed.
Let me ask you this, and if you kind of look 5 years down the road, has the pandemic done anything to change traditional schooling? I mean, are you seeing a trend in education is going to be changed in a different way, or what are you seeing that this was a disruptor to classic public education?
Well, on the one hand, to take your question a little different way, I think everyone, especially parents, had a newfound respect for what teachers do because of the burden of trying to teach.
I mean, you saw over
home.
Their shoulder, or they were
Correct.
bringing it to you,
Right.
and you were the one that was helping dissect it and
Correct.
seeing what was happening.
So I think there was a greater appreciation of what teachers do every day. Beyond that, without a doubt, I think our teachers had to become more comfortable with technology. I think systems have become more comfortable with digital textbooks and tablets and laptops, especially districts like ours that didn't have those resources. So we fast forward our plan from a technology point of view probably by 5 years because
Out of
of the
necessity.
pandemic. Right.
Yeah.
So next year, all of our students will have a laptop or a tablet that they get when they come to school. They'll use it throughout the day, drop it off, it'll charge, come back. All of our materials now are digital. So yeah, we still have the hard copies, but it's digital as well. So you're seeing a lot of advancement in that place. I think in the future, we can do things differently because of the pandemic and what we've learned around equitable access to advanced placement classes. So some schools have an advanced placement calculus teacher, but we have other schools where maybe only 5 students would be eligible to take that class, but no teacher. So what I see happening in the future is that those 5 students at the high school could log in to the advanced placement teacher, let's say at CAS, and access that class where they normally wouldn't be able to do. That's where I think some improvements. Or, now in DPSCD we have a virtual school, which is we have separate group of teachers, principal. We have about 2,000 students that are virtual, not coming in person. I think those numbers will decline a bit, but it has enabled us to recruit more students to DPSCD. So that's certainly an advancement due to the pandemic.
Last question, what keeps you up at night?
A lot of things. Right now, it's increasing enrollment.
Yeah.
Almost every large urban school district in the country has seen about a 5 to 10% drop in enrollment, so that's on my mind. The other thing on my mind is catching up what we've lost, just the learning loss, and trying to re-jumpstart the momentum we had as a system linked to reform. It's really hard to get folks back into student achievement, performance, because it just feels like we're catching up. So
that we're just saying, we made it to school today, check the box, that's
Exactly,
a victory.
yeah.
It needs to go beyond that
yeah,
now.
and there was a lot of that because of emergency management,
Right.
just skepticism about reform, about really accountability. And we made such progress. Pandemic hit, and I feel like we're revisiting some of the narrative that we had with emergency management. You know, our kids haven't been in school for 25 days. They're behind. How can we talk about accountability? Well, we have to, because ultimately we're responsible to improve student achievement, and that's a promise that we've made to our students, our families, and the community, and we have to get back to that. But it's a balance. We're talking about that and being sensitive to the realities of the pandemic. That's what keeps me up, is that constant balance between the two right now.
Well, we hope that you have a good, safe summer, and you're going to be starting earlier,
Yep,
before Labor Day.
A week
in the
earlier,
fall.
we think that's going to help with enrollment, and we can get out of the school year earlier. June 27th for us is way too long.
It's very long.
Hoping to get an end date closer to Memorial Weekend.
All right, we'll be watching Dr. Nikolai Vitti from DPSCD. It's always good to see you.
You too. Thank you.
All right, and we'll be right back. Stay with us.